Hi, welcome to another episode of Relational Leadership and Conscious Cultures. I am your host, Candy Barone, and I am a relational leadership and culture architect. I'm also an executive strategic advisor for transformational leaders, really at that cusp of growth's edge, moving into their next level of leading their living legacy and building conscious cultures and communities in the process. And so today I really want to lean into the topic of sacred cows and the elephants that often are standing in the room, creating tension points in an organization that often are where trust unravels, the culture unravels, and momentum stops altogether. And so when I say sacred cows, I know if you are somebody that's had quite a corporate career like I did, 20 years in corporate, you may be familiar with the term sacred cows. You may have heard it tossed around a little bit, but more times than not, even in the corporate sector, I find that when I talk about sacred cows, I get leaders to respond or question, can you give me an example of what a sacred cow actually looks like? And so I want to talk about that a little bit because I will say that when I engage in work with the leaders that I work with, one of the first questions out of the gate is, do you have any sacred cows? And the way they respond is an indicator of whether or not they're actually an ideal client for me to work with and they're coachable. Because if somebody immediately goes, no, my guess is they are already part of the problem and they likely are the sacred cow that's not going to be addressed. Because here's the thing, everyone, myself included, we all have sacred cows. We all have things that we think are non-negotiables that have actually created bottlenecks or have created ways that we are shortchanging how we can scale our business, how we can grow our team, how we can attract the right team members or clients or opportunities. And they become these things we hang our hat on and we dig our heels in and we think, no, that is not up for discussion. Whenever someone says that they don't have sacred cows, one of two things is happening. Either they are completely oblivious to what's happening in their organization and culture, which I will still excavate and see and explore. Is it really that they don't have sacred cows, or do they not understand what a sacred cow is? So we're going to first kind of refine that question. If they really do understand what a sacred cow is and they're like, no, end of conversation for me. It is that simple because it is not a leader that is coachable, nor is it a leader that's willing to get transparent, honest, or vulnerable in the fact that they themselves could be the very bottleneck in their organization or in their company. When a leader says, yeah, probably, or yes, I do, the next question always is, are those sacred cows up for discussion? And here's why. Because, and I'll give you a couple examples of this so you can see how I'll give you both a entrepreneurial model and a corporate model as an example so you can kind of understand where sacred cows live. And I will tell you, sacred cows are not just about people in the organization. Sacred cows can be projects, systems, ideas. They can be old mission, core values, and the way the business was started, but it's pivoted and it's turned and it's dealing with new markets. It could be your market itself. It could be fundamentally anything that is creating a crutch or creating a hard line non-negotiable that is not truly a core values. This is who I am. This is what we represent and this is what we serve. But it's holding on to anything because you think it has to be so. And so it creates a very fixed mindset, but it also creates a lot of tension within the organization, the business as well. And so I want to give you a couple examples of what this might look like so that you fully understand when I say sacred cow, what I'm talking about. So, for instance, I work a lot with companies that are family owned businesses, or there's family employees that are working within the organization or infrastructure. So many times, and I've lost count, where that family member is actually the sacred cow. And I've actually had leaders who have been very abrupt and direct to say, yes, I have sacred cows, and it's my brother-in-law who's working in the marketing department, or it's my wife who works over here, and I'm not sure that's something we can resolve. As long as I know where the sacred cow is and I know what is possible, especially in an environment that may be a family business, we can work within side of that framework And it requires a real, honest evaluation and assessment of what's really going on. And so, a lot of my work initially, especially when I go in to kind of excavate that root problem, is really to audit. It's to do audits on multiple levels. Some of them are formal, some of them are informal. I have been the fly on the wall that has sat in day long meetings watching dynamics, especially if a leader's like, I know there's sacred cows. I think I might be one of them. Not sure where they are. I'm like, then I want to come in and watch. I want to come in because I will be able to see where the sacred cows are pretty rapidly. So that is an example where somebody might say, oh, it's my brother-in-law, or it's my wife, or it's somebody that's in my family that's in the business, might be someone that's, quote, untouchable. We start there doesn't mean that's always the case as we get through the process. So that then leads to more auditing and more discovery that to what level is this person off limits? What do we need to consider? Is it that they need to be part of the business, but maybe we could look at they're in the wrong seat, wrong part of the bus, maybe they need a different role, whatever that looks like. But we do need to name where those hard lines are, or at least where those perceived hard lines are at the onset of the conversation. And so that's an example of a sacred cow that it could be, say, a family member in a business like that. I'm going to give you another example. I was doing a training for a large Fortune 500 company, and we were having this conversation. This was a day long training, and we went super deep. Like, this was a crack you open. Leaders are going to show up in this room. It got very raw, real, and vulnerable. And of course, I do what I do, which was challenge and call out the bullshit that was happening so that we could get to something that was really core. And a lot of times when I do those trainings, I go to the team function or the dinner later because that's where the real magic happens. They oftentimes, even when people are being vulnerable or crack open in the room of their peers in a leadership team, it's only when, hey, now they can take the, put their hair down, they can kick their shoes off, they can have a cocktail. Now they're in social mode that the real conversation actually activates. And so oftentimes over these dinners is when I get into full coaching mode and I get into full advisory mode. And so, for example, one of these Fortune 500 companies, actually Fortune 100 company that I was doing a deep leadership container and training with, we were at dinner and three of the executive leadership team came up to me and said, Candy, we actually have a question for you. And I could tell by the nature and the tone of the way they were going to ask the question, I already looked at them and said, you already know the answer to this question. And they kind of gave me that meek, yeah, and we're hoping you're going to tell us something different, even though based on what we just did today, the writing's on the wall, because this is usually what happens when a sacred cow is exposed. So they had the, what I will say is the traditional conversation that is the one of the biggest sources of sacred cows in larger organizations, especially in the corporate sector. We're going to call this person Jim. And any Jims that are listening, please don't take offense. I'm not calling out a Jim. I'm just saying as a name, we're going to give this sacred cow a name, and his name is Jim. And the three executives said to me, Jim is our top salesperson. And I just kind of sat and listened and I shook my head because I knew what was coming next. And here's where they dropped the bomb. And Jim is an asshole. Jim is a narcissist. Jim is a sexist. Jim is a racist. Like, it was all the things. Jim is someone who doesn't play by the rules. Jim doesn't fit our values. Jim is culturally a nightmare, yet he's our top sales guy. And they kept saying, but he's our top sales guy. He's our top sales guy. I said, uh-huh. And he's your sacred cow. And they all just looked at me and they knew that already. That's why they were asking me the question. And I said, here's what I want you to consider. Right now, you think Jim is your top salesperson, and you are making all these concessions, excuses, workarounds, and one-offs to accommodate Jim, who, when push comes to shove, violates everything you say your culture stands for, values and otherwise, is not a team player, yet everything you're doing is to pump Jim up and do whatever Jim needs. So here's what's happening in your organization as a result. Here's a couple potential things that are probably the undercurrent. One, you likely have five, six other really high performers that actually could do better performance than Jim, but either they are intimidated, feel like the rules don't apply to Jim, so why do they care? They are disengaging and they are going to quietly or loudly leave your organization because they do not feel like there is a culture of trust, safety, or rules that everybody is playing by. You're going to lose likely your best employees because you keep making Jim your sacred cow. Two, there is a trust deficiency. No doubt. This one I guarantee is happening because everybody says, oh, the rules apply to us, but not Jim. Oh, Jim is special. Oh, Jim is, therefore, you do not get people that give you honest feedback. You do not get people that push back. You do not get people that are engaged and committed and they are just doing the job because it pays them and they are keeping their head down. You do not have an actual culture. What you have is a place where everything is about Jim and you've got a bunch of people that are basically cleaning up all of the stuff around Jim. So, for example, Jim is the one that inadvertently launches these grenades, and then everybody else is either hemorrhaging, bleeding out, or cleaning up the shrapnel because, again, Jim's untouchable. So, I'm going to give you a so again, they were like, oh, and the air just came out. And I said, you know what you need to do? Jim needs to go. I mean, there is no question about it. Jim needs to go. I'm going to give you two other examples around this. When I was in one of my corporate roles, my direct boss above me on our leadership team, we had one of my counterparts who was, just for the lack of going in too deep, a horrible human being, just a horrible human being. And really was this bully in on our team. And she got all this additional coaching, all this additional support because my boss kept seeing her potential and wanted to love on her and wanted to find a way to bring her into the team. And I see this, and I know that I have this is one of my deficiencies sometimes. I will want to love people through the potential I see for them, even when they have made it very clear they have no intention of stepping into said potential. One of the hardest things as a leader who's compassionate to let go of is you are not here to fix everybody, and you cannot coach someone who is very clearly, adamantly opposed to being coached and not coachable. She poured into my colleague to the point where we were at one of our regional meetings. Obviously, they're doing some of the leadership roll-ups and training and thing we were doing. And over a glass of wine, she got very emotional with me and said, "Oh my God, you're not going to believe what your colleague said to me when she came in the office today or earlier this week." Apparently, her daughter bullied another girl at school, and she came in bragging about it. And I looked at my boss at the time and I said, you know, you need to let her go. You've got to stop bleeding out on her behalf. She is creating a toxic culture where I personally almost knocked her through a wall because I watched her bully someone on our team and I called her out for it because I won't have it. I will call a bully out all day long. And sometimes that got me in a whole heap of hot water during my corporate career because I absolutely am the person that will call out the underdog and the bully who is poking at said underdog. And I looked at her and said, you know, she has to go. You have done everything you can possibly do as a leader. And she knew it. So she ultimately got moved into another department and then ultimately let go from the company. And that was really hard because my boss was a very compassionate, loves her people, all about developing people. Like I will say my entire 20 years of corporate was the leader that really cracked me open on a whole nother level of how to develop your team and develop your people, which is carried into my coaching work. She was pivotal in this work that I do now. And so I get that. And we need energetic boundaries and we need clear lines that say, I've done what I can do and now it's time to let it go. And so we had to let go of that sacred cow because that sacred cow was demolishing and diminishing what we stood for in our culture. We had people that clamored to be on our team because of the culture we were creating. And then we had this toxic leak that if we would have continued to feed that toxicity, we would have lost everything that made our culture so great. The other example was at another Fortune 100 company that I worked at in my corporate career. I was the commercial ops manager and managed all of the risk and deal negotiations for our large contracts. And these were contracts that really had to watch where we were discounting, what we were doing, so that it didn't retroactively affect the discount we were giving the government and things. There was just a whole lot of layers to this, and it was a very high stress position. In fact, in another video or another podcast episode, I will talk about what that job did to me and how it put me in the hospital and how it also was part of the catalytic path that got me to do this work at this point, because it nearly killed me multiple times. That being said, I was indirectly in charge of multiple regions, multiple regional directors, and their entire deal portfolio. And we had one region that was the region itself was a sacred cow, but they were our high performers. They were the legacy sales guys. They were the ones that had been in the business with every turn. They were the high performers, always bringing in. They were the ones that lifted the OP, all the things. And one in particular was a bit of a cowboy who liked to do things his own way. And at one point, I found out he overrode my authority on a discount, and he gave a client discount that was not approved. So I wrote him up. My boss at the time went crazy and went, I know, but that's so and so. That's Jim. We don't write Jim up. Jim's our top sales guy. And I'm like, I'm just going to tell you straight out. Either Jim plays by the same rules as the rest of the 5 regions. I have 120 reps to wrangle in like a bunch of cats because they're all over the place, or I don't close another deal for this team, period. And my boss looked at me, and I think I was serious. I'm like, you can't close deals without me doing this deal analysis, without me. I will not close another deal if he does not learn to play by the same rules. So he got written up. And what happened was 2 things. One, he came barging in my office because he was hot, and he was all like, great. And I just said, great, do it again and I'll have your ass fired. Like, I'm not even kidding. I'm not going to play around with this. And the second highest salesperson, who was also on that team, came into my office shortly later, and he goes, you are the first person that's ever stood up to Jim. Thank you. You let me know if you need anything. I've always got your back. Because now other people recognize that, oh, we're all going to play by the same rules, and that actually creates safety and trust in an environment. So then when we would have new sales guys come in to our regions, our training person would bring me in on a Thursday after all the sales training was done. They were going into their graduation, and then they were going to go out, celebrate that night, and then they were going to kind of close things the next day. And inevitably, and I love it because he would be like, I love the way you would come in, and I get it. I'm 5'2". People look at me and they think, oh, people have like 3 different distinct impressions of me, and with like 2 minutes, because they see my stature and they think one thing. Then if I happen to saunter, as another client told me, across a room, they're like, whoa, what just happened? And then they hear me speak and they're like, whoa, not what I expected. Again, don't judge a book by its cover. Anyway, I don't look my age. I'm 5'2". I'm kind of pint size. Like, I get that. So I would come in and play to that. And I'm like, look, I'm your comm ops manager. I'm here as your channel development director. I'm going to help you move whatever deal you need to move. I'm your partner in this. I've got you. I've got your back. And all these guys, it was mostly guys in the room, would all be like, oh yeah, we got her. She's like, okay, she's just going to be another part of our admin team. We're going to do this. And I would let them all get kind of cocky and comfortable, and I would pause. And then I would change and shift modes. And my energy would go into comma. If any of you think that you are going to override, step outside the boundaries, or think in any way, shape, or form you're going to disregard my rules and the way that we build this process and the way that we run these deal negotiations, I will make your life a living hell, and you will never close another deal on this team. And like, silence. Because they were like, whoa, what just happened? And I love, because the trainer's always like, man, it's like you come in. And I have another friend of mine that says, even in these trainings, right? Like I talk to you, and then it's like, boom, I'm going to lay a hammer. It's kind of what I do. He's like, but man, you come in and you get them all feeling all good and cocky and whatever. And he goes, man, then you would just throw a hammer and you just throw the gauntlet down and you would just let it hang. And he goes, man, the conversations at dinner that night. But I'll tell you what, every single one of those people that came through that sales training knew exactly what our protocol, our culture, and what to expect. And I did. I supported them in every way possible. And our region outperformed everybody else's. We actually hit our OP every single time. We were able to grow the entire Western region. And I will say it's a complete direct result of making sure that one, we address the sacred cows. We got those sacred cows in alignment or got them out. And we made sure people knew the rules of engagement and what to expect, and that everybody had the same rules that they were playing by. This is what you do when you have to address sacred cows. It is absolutely imperative. And I will tell you, a lot of what I get brought in to do is what I will call that Hail Mary pass, or the holy crap, the tension has gotten so big that oftentimes I'm the person that needs to come in and actually address the sacred cows, and oftentimes there's more than one, that are causing these trust leaks and causing these relationship erosions and causing these cultures to break down. It's the hard conversations, which leads me to the elephants in the room. So oftentimes the sacred cows and the elephants are sort of in the same family together. They are all part of the same animal kingdom because oftentimes the sacred cows lead to the conversations that are not happening. I cannot tell you. I even did a training for one of the government agencies here in Texas where literally midstream in my workshop, I had to call out the like ginormous purple elephant standing in the room that literally had at least one paw on four of the leaders' necks in that room. That I'm like, okay, before we go any further, we're going to call out what just happened. To which the feedback I got from said agency was, wow, have to say, buckle up if you bring Candy in. She actually forced us to have the conversations that we have been dancing around for 2 years and crack things wide open that we no longer cannot have those conversations. And it has changed everything about how we're working together and how we can lead. And thank you, Candy, for calling out the elephants in the room, because what happens is there's so much toe tapping and sidestepping and dancing that oftentimes I get leaders that when we call out the sacred cows, they're like, and I'll give you another example of a client of mine. We recognize that one of his best buddies, here's a sacred cow. He's like, he's not working in this environment. I'm like, great, then he needs to leave. 3 years. Three, count them, 1, 2, 3. 3 years we had the same conversation about how his buddy was not a fit for this culture. To which, when it finally came, push came to shove, and he had no other choice because he was hemorrhaging. I'll never forget this call. He calls me and he goes, so I let him go, and you're not going to believe what he said. And I was like, yeah, I know exactly what he said, but lay it on me. And he's like, his immediate response was, well, it took you long enough. Because here's the thing, most of the time, the sacred cows and elephants, they already know they're there. They're just like waiting out the time because everybody's dancing around the hard conversation that actually needs to happen. Leadership does not happen on the easy route and the attaboys, and the leadership happens on the conversations that matter, on the conversations that are difficult, and on the conversations that often have people getting butt hurt. How you deliver those conversations is an art, and there is a responsibility in how you can do that compassionately and with kindness, but also be direct and clear. By the way, kind is a result of being direct and clear. It is not about nice. It is not about pacifying. It is not about making everybody feel good and singing kumbaya. It is about, as a business owner, as a corporate leader, as an entrepreneur, a founder, otherwise community leader, it is about knowing how to have the hard conversations to address the things that are the tension points in your organization. I will let you know that I would put money on the table to say, even companies that have done the work, there's always layers of this. But I would be hard pressed to find a company that does not have at least one sacred cow and at least one elephant that's dancing and taking over and sucking the air out of a room. Because there is always a conversation that is not happening. And there are always tension points where people have drawn the line and dug their heels in and said, this is untouchable and non negotiable. Those things fundamentally break down what you keep thinking and saying your culture is. Your culture is nowhere near that if you've got that going on. And the price you pay is top talent, high performance, efficiency and effectiveness of work, sustainable systems and processes, ideal dream clients you actually want to work with. Like the list goes on and on and on. And you want to talk about where there's a real ROI. And I will say ROI, it's so funny to me. I'm going to do a whole thing on this too on ROI, redefining it. Oftentimes people think ROI is money in versus money out. No, it's a function of time, money, energy, people, resources, and the culture and lifestyle you're creating. So I'm just going to leave that there. But I also want to say that we need to stop thinking about return on investment and think about return on influence, return on impact, and return on our relationships, because relationships really are the new currency that we're moving into. And if you are not creating a culture where real conversations feel safe, where people have room to fail and try things on and experiment, where sacred cows are being called out and bullshit is brought to the table and exposed, where there's not real excavation and exploration around root causes that are creating tension points and trust leaks and eroding your culture. If you are not doing those things, you do not have a business that's going to be sustainable for long. You have a business that's going to have a shit ton of turnover. You have a business that is going to be eroding margins all over the place because of inefficiencies. You're going to have communication breakdowns between silos and teams. You're going to have people who are literally disengaged and keeping their head down because it's just a job. Like, again, the list goes on, and I want you to really think about where is the cost and what is the ultimate price for you not addressing the sacred cows and the elephants that are dancing or holding you hostage because they got their foot on your neck in your organization. This is the work that I do. This is the work that I go in and excavate. And it is an excavation. It is not a leadership strategy. It is not a rah bullshit session that somebody was like, yeah, let's get the team fired up on a Thursday and Friday. And that's the same shit or worse on Monday. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about real transparency, real honesty, getting raw, real, gritty, vulnerable, and making the investment time, money, energy, resources, and otherwise to really look at what is your current foundation? How was it structured? I watch a lot of home renovation shows. I love renovation shows. I'm an engineer by background, mechanical engineer, started out as an architectural engineer. So I love engineering and foundations and architecture and again, why I really am a human architect. I'm a human design architect and a relational leadership and culture architect. It's what I do. Because what we often need to do, if you ever watch any of those home improvement shows, if they do any kind of major renovation, oftentimes one of the first questions is the foundation structural? Is it safe? Is it sound? And oftentimes they have to go in and do some work to reset, re-level, or structure aspects of the foundation so that what they build actually can sustain. It is the same thing I do when I go into organizations, whether they are small, medium, startup, entrepreneurial businesses, or they are Fortune 500, Fortune 100 corporate entities, organizations, and teams. It is about going in first to assess and audit, is the current foundation you have stable? Is it sound? And is it built in a way that's going to create sustainability? Or do we need to go in and put the cinder blocks under, lay some more cement, level things out, or completely demolish it and start all over? Oftentimes it's kind of that, like you're re-cementing, putting in some new 2x4s or some new beams. Maybe they're 2x8s, 2x10s, whatever they are. They're structural beams that are actually going to provide some additional support. But we have to get into the root to figure out where the actual cracks are starting. Because it's really easy. And I know I live in an old house and I've got some foundational stuff going on. You probably might even be able to see one behind me. I don't think my camera's on it, but higher up. Which means at some point somebody's going to have to get in underneath the house and put some support beams and probably lay some concrete and do some things to re-level my house so that it can last another 40 years or 400 years or whatever it's supposed to do. The same analogy is relevant and critical when you're looking at your business as well. Not only is there an internal architecture, there is also an external architecture. And it's only when you are willing to look at where those cracks, and sometimes they are micro cracks. And if you listen to the first episode that I launched last week, I talked about where some of those micro cracks come in, because it's the micro cracks that compound, that become the big shifts in your foundation, that then the house is literally, it's almost as if it was built on sand. And so my question to you is, do you have a sound foundation? Do you know where the cracks are coming from? And I guarantee there's some cracks. Or have you actually gotten to a point where you're kind of operating from a place where the house is being built on sand? And if you want to have that conversation, then I encourage you to reach out, because this is the work that I do, and this is the excavation that is required for you to structurally get your foundation reset, so that as you build the culture that you keep visioning and the culture that you say that you value and is most important, you do it from a conscious perspective and intentionally. Because again, this is relational leadership being, first of all of our relationship starts with ourselves. You cannot build real, deep, meaningful, powerful relationships and connections with others if you do not have a relationship in that capacity with yourself. That's first. And then it is all about building conscious cultures. This is not building cultures by default. It's about being intentional about the way you want to structure your core values and your leadership, so that you can allow everybody to be leading from the highest capacity, leading from a place where they feel empowered, embodied, and it's a really awesome place to work. So, with that, this is Candy. Once again, this is Relational Leaderships and Conscious Cultures. I look forward to hearing what landed most for you in this conversation. Drop me a comment. Be sure to subscribe, because I've got more of these little nuggets on your way.